Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Lava Users Forum. I'm Rémi Durafort. I'm a Lava main developer, I will say. We have Stevan working also on Lava. Steve that was working on Lava, not working anymore, but still knows some bit about it. And we have Antonio that is working again on Lava a bit. So the goal of this forum is to answer your questions. And I will start by showing you some stuff that we did since last Connect, because usually we ask, what do you have any questions? And it's a bit quiet for sometimes. So feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. That's the goal of the slides. I have some new stuffs. I guess you will have questions about it. So if you have any questions, just interrupt me and we will talk about it right away.
Yeah, if you do have a question, wait for a mic so everybody can hear and we get it recorded.
Okay, so since Bangkok, we did 5 major releases, 5 releases, which means 33 new device types, and not only U-boot device types that are usually just 1 or 2 liners, but real new device types. Miloš fixed the device type aliases that does exist for a long time, but that was completely useless previously. Now you can really use it. Same if you have questions about it, just ask. A new feature that we added is it's a way to compress logs. So on a large instance like validation.now.org or LKFT, the logs are taking a lot of space. So we can XZ all the logs. There is a command line to do that. So you just do Lava server manage jobs compress, and it will compress all the jobs that are more than 30 days. And the nice thing is that you can still browse the web UI or ask for the logs, and it will be uncompressed on the fly. So you won't, as a user, you won't see it, but the admin will be happy about it. We had an external contribution about, we have a lot of tables in the web UI. The size of the table is not fixed, so the number of elements in the table depends on the tables. It's a bit, yeah. So now it's a setting that you can set. So admins can decide that all the table will be 25 elements each. And as a user, you can define how many elements you want in each table. It's a small improvement, but that's nice for users. For admin, we added sentry error reporting. So this will give you a mail and trace back every time a 500 is generated by anyone, which is pretty useful. And we had a large change from Stevan about authentication, and he will speak about it a bit later on. So regarding the Lava methods, so boot deployment and boot methods, we had some external contributions. So if you're using Grub, you can deploy on NBD servers if you want, if that's something you want. That's now possible if you do have an NBD server. For the boots, we are now supporting Bearbox, the Bearbox bootloader. This is also an external contribution, which is a large contribution. So if you don't know Bearbox, it looks like U-boot from a user perspective. It's just a shell in which you can enter commands, but the concepts are really different behind it. We can also deploy and boot using DFU, a DFU that is implemented by U-boot. So Lava will the board will boot to U-boot, and then in the shell we will switch to a DFU mode. And then Lava will talk in DFU to the board and flash it. We use that for LCES too, the Schneider boards, and it's working quite well.
Can it work? Yeah. Okay. So is it possible to just use DFU without U-boot?
Yeah, sure.
So if you boot the board and it goes into DFU mode.
Yes, yes. That was already supported for a long time, just using DFU, hardware DFU. So the new improvement is to use the U-boot-based DFU, so U-boot implementation. A new thing it's not really new. We were supporting kexec for a long time, and it was broken for a long time, so I guess no one is really using it. I fixed the support. So now, if you want to try kexec on your machine, on your device, it's now supported. So it will kexec, so it will reboot, and you will see, and Lava will check that the kexec is working correctly. So that might be a test also for Linux test.
Yeah, for DFU, can you set the USB serial via U-boot console or something like that, in order to to identify the board?
So the reason why we are using DFU from U-boot in the Schneider board is that the hardware DFU does not have a serial number. Yeah, it does not have a serial number. It's all zeros, and the U-boot DFU does have a serial number. Do you know if you can set it, Ryan?
You can.
In U-boot.
In U-boot,
Oh, okay.
it's an environment variable in U-boot.
Yeah, the environment variable is created automatically on the LCS2 board, but you can set the variable manually as well to override the one that's created automatically, if you know what I mean.
So in the shell, in the U-boot shell, you can
in the
override
U-boot shell,
it?
you can set the serial number. Okay. Yeah, but by default, well, it depends on the U-boot port. In the U-boot port I'm using, we have some custom code in there to set that serial number, but that's using the standard set serial number stuff. So you set the serial number of the board using the regular U-boot API, and then the DFU picks up that serial number.
Loki, is that something you will need Lava to support, to set the serial number on the fly? Is that what you're asking for?
For example, if there is no persistent serial number, maybe we can make Lava generate at runtime a random serial number, set the serial number via U-boot and the serial, and then detect the board. But
technically, that's already possible because in the device dictionary, you can specify the commands that will ask U-boot to go into DFU, and it's a list of commands that Lava will send.
Mm-hmm.
So you can send as a first command set of the serial number, and then just DFU.
Yeah.
So you can already do that. Changing the device dictionary, you can do that if you want.
Okay.
Okay, if you know, we also support what we call minimal boot, which is you just start the board and it will boot automatically to something that Lava can understand. In order to do U-boot to U-boot, you go into DFU, you flash to DFU, and then you boot to Linux. You had to do a DFU boot and then a minimal boot. And before, Lava was always resetting the power, so nothing was remaining in memory. So now if you do a minimal boot, you can ask to not reset the board, so it will continue to boot. So you can chain a DFU boot and then a minimal boot. We also support now OpenOCD to flash and boot the board, but only on CC3220 SF board. That's the only board that we know that do that. And in the tests, you can set environments. I will explain that. So since 1906, if you do a bit of Android and LXC, you know that there is some static info and storage info that are available to set some informations. This is now exported in the test shell. So when you write a test in the test block, you will have all this exported as variables that you can use. So we export this is an array of dictionary. So static info will be static info 0, so the first element of the array, and then we export every keys in the dictionary. So it's a long string then, but it's unique, and you can easily guess what it will be. And the same if you want to export some specific information, like you have a Chameleon board connected to a device, and you want to know the IP or this kind of stuff. You can add an environment variable in your device dictionary with this kind of information, and it will be exported in the test shell. So you can then just use the same relay address, and it will depend on the board. Really, so it can be really useful for some usage.
So is that a per device configuration? Someone will do it at the
Yes,
backend?
it's in the device dictionary, so it's per device. Exactly, yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, if you have two devices with two different chameleon boards, you will define the address of the first one on the first device dict. And if you use the same name, so the same variable name, then you can have the same test script on both boards. That's the goal, yes. I will leave Stefan to explain authentication refactoring.
Which one? This? Okay, so first is what we did was basically refactor the authorization system in Lava. Let's just say the old system wasn't scalable. I don't want to get into much more details, but what we decided to do is basically use the existing Django permissions authorization system and expand it to be able to support per object authorization. Essentially, it means that you can control user permissions on individual objects in Lava. So we support this kind of authorization for three entities. That's device type, device, and test job. New permissions that are available are view, submit, and admin. So you can control who can basically view any of those entities or submit jobs to, or do some administration stuff. Basically, this means that you can control what and let the users take the device offline and stuff like that. So if basically if you don't want to use this kind of authorization, then just you can rely on the global authorization system that's imposed by Django, and then all these kind of objects will be non-restricted, so to say. So Django will use authorization system in place to determine whether a user has access to it or not. But once you add settings to this to the database, then the objects will be restricted. This kind of, we made it so that this kind of permission system is inheritable, meaning that if you apply any permissions to a device type, all the devices will inherit those permissions, and all the test jobs that are on this device type will also inherit those permissions. Anonymous users will only be able to have limited kind of permissions on any object regarding this per object authorization, and that will apply to only non-restricted objects. So if you if any way add any permission settings to any object, the anonymous users will be automatically forbidden to have access to that objects, and this is as opposing to the authenticated users. So it's a bit different for the different kind of permissions. So authenticated users will, for example, have a view permission for any non-restricted, submit permission for any non-restricted object in the system, but not for the view permission. Hope I'm not confusing. This basically all this allow administrators to have an easier life as opposed to before. So basically they can fine-grain permission system first on the device type level, and then if they don't need any lower level permission settings, that they can just skip it, and then they can do the same for the device and the specific test jobs. Basically didn't want the end user to notice anything during this change and after the migration, so we kept a couple of couple of old settings in the database that applies to the test jobs specifically. So the viewing groups and is public settings are remaining in place. So basically, viewing groups was the way for the test job submitter to say, okay, I want these groups to, and only these groups to be able to view this test job, and this will trump over any other permission settings, inheritable or not, in the system. And same goes for the public setting for the test job. So if the job is set to non-public, private, then nobody except the submitter and the super user will be able to access this test job. So there was, yeah, let's go on to the data migration. So since we are removing all the previous data that was in the system, removing the fields from the database, the old data is not persisted anymore. So once you do an upgrade to the 2019-09, you will not be able to go back, downgrade and have those previous settings or the authorization settings before, like. There was the, what was the name of the field, the device type, yeah, I don't remember. Anyway, so this is just a big consideration to have in mind. The other thing that is relevant is that the public field in the test job has changed the behavior a bit. So. Right now, previously the public meant that it will be available for the test job will be available for anyone to view. But right now, with the new system, is public field is used to forbid actually users to view the test job. But if the job is public, then the authorization system will be applied. So after that, that's another thing to keep in mind. Any questions so far? Okay. So this is the next couple of slides are just sort of visualize decision trees for viewing the device type, device and test job. So I will just briefly, all these are available in the documentation. So the documentation is still not in the release, unfortunately, but it's in the main line, and you can check it out on staging VLO. So yeah, all these are also presented in the documentation. So I will not go into any details here. It's quite simple for device and device types, and for the test job, it's a bit trickier since we are still using the viewing groups in these public fields. That's all I had.
So yeah, as the authentication changed and the way we check things has changed, that's why we had to fix some stuff in the invalidation, and some people were not able anymore to submit because we had some problems. But now we have a saner system, which should work more. Yeah, it will be cleaner, and we'll have more features for admins if they want to restrict things and everything like that. So yeah, just look at the documentation on the website if you want to know exactly how it's working. This is more for admins, but another stuff that changed in 1904, it's a job definition context. I don't know if you know that. I guess some people know. In the job definition, you have a dictionary called context. Like this is for a QMA job, you can set the architecture that you want to run on. It was a free-form dictionary before, and we discovered some security issues with that. So now it's the list of keys that you can have is restricted. It's a white list of keys that you can have. The list is here if you really want to have a look at it. Something like 30 or 40 keys, so not really interesting. But this is now restricted. So if the variable that you're used to use in the context is not working anymore, you will see the at submission it will be refused. The job will be refused. Just ask me to add it, and I can add it quickly. And if needed, admin can add some variables to the whitelist, and just restarting Lava server, and it will be applied immediately. So we can, I can fix it for the next release, and in the meantime, admins can add it to their own whitelist, and it will work immediately for you. So if you see errors regarding the context, that's why you're using a key that is not allowed anymore. So just send me a mail and a mail to the admin, and we can fix that for you. For information, if you use your own instance, you can. We provide Lava server and Lava dispatcher Docker images that you can use to install Lava on your own machine. We use Debian Stretch Slim. We will go to Buster soon, not in this release, but in the next one. Something important change. We fixed the Lava server, the user ID and the group ID to be 200. Why have we done that? Because if you were using the Docker container for a long time, when we create the Lava server user, if you don't specify any user ID or group ID, it will take the next available one. And if for any reason the Buster image, the base Buster image, when you create it, you install many packages, and if any of this package does create a user, your user ID for Lava server will change. It was 101 before, it will be 102. But if you keep the data from one Docker container to another, then you won't be able to write it anymore. So we fixed it to a large number, so 200. It's large enough normally. So we don't have to do that anymore. So some people had to do a chown and chgroup to change all the data. In order to be sure, we check that all the files in these two directories, they do belong to Lava server with 200 UID and GID. So if you see an error when you start your Lava server or Lava server Docker image, that's the reason. You just have to do a chown -r. That's only if you use your own volume with your own data inside it. But that's something important, just to be future-proof in case. And the last thing I have, I think, yes, that's it. It's about Lava federate testing, just a small update. I was speaking about Lava Fed last Connect. We expanded it a bit. Now we are testing every day on 12 device types. And 11 are from Linaro and 1 from a member company. So ST Microelectronics, they are providing one device type that is running inside their own lab, behind their own firewall. So we have to cross firewalls, but it's working well. And it's really useful. We do found crashes and real errors and real problems with it. So if you have your own device type in your own lab that is not Linaro ones, please think about it, because that's the only way we have to check that your devices are working. And if your device is not in Lava Fed, just talk to us, please. Do you have any questions? The goal of the slides were to make you ask questions. Yeah, there were some questions.
Yes, got a few questions. So one is, just hear out my use case. I don't know whether you appreciate it or not. So this is in the context of scheduler testing. We do have a kind of test suite where essentially we have to repeat our tests as multiple iterations. And one of the key considerations we have is we might be running our tests that might, as part of executing it, leave my system state not in a suitable state so that I can't just repeat my second iteration as a follow-up of that. So I would like to start it from a clean state. So in an ideal scenario, what I would like to have is, I want to have a deploy, I want to have a boot, which is my first boot, which tells me how to boot that particular target. And then I specify the test shell. And then a means to say, I want to run this test shell for 100 iterations where I've got a reboot between those iterations so that I have that clean state. And kind of we tried to hack it. By what we did is we just used a template, generated a large job definition with boot and test shells repeated. It just ended up killing my Lava server. That's all it ended up with. But this is a kind of a use case we have. I mean, do you think it's sensible? Is that workable from your perspective?
Okay, in the initial design of the pipeline, so when we did the Lava refactoring, we added a repeat keyword, so you can have you have your list of actions, and you can have an action which is repeat, in which you will have a list of actions to repeat. We never implemented it because it's not easy to implement. It breaks a lot of assumptions that we have on the pipeline, and that's something we consider to do, but not urgent for us right now. So I think, yes, the best answer for you is to use your Jinja generator. That's a good way to do it, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, he ended up complaining because I really broke his setup. So, okay, that is kind of, I was just explaining the use case where kind of we had to do
And
it.
yeah, the problem that Dean is reporting is that it takes a lot of time, just to explain for the people. When you have a really large job definition with hundreds of actions, at the end of the job, Lava has to parse the job description, which is a really large YAML that describes everything that Lava does. And when you have hundreds of actions, it can take literally minutes to do. So specifically for Dean, for your use case, so we know how to fix that in Lava, technically, to make this parsing asynchronous, because we can do it asynchronously. And if we do that, then it's not a problem anymore.
Okay.
We know how to do it. Dean knows how to do it too. So it's just a matter of taking some time to implement it. It's not really difficult.
Okay.
That's if shouldn't be a problem for you. If this solution is okay for you, then just go for it, and we will fix the performance issue.
So the second kind of a pain point sometimes is we do have type of tests where essentially it's a long period stress test. I run tests where it lasts for a week, and it results in generating huge amount of data. And again, this has caused my Lava server to kind of die because, I mean, not die in the sense the performance is impacted because it's now opening a huge file and then try to service it. And that has caused a couple of times issues where Dean had to go and then purge some of this data or the jobs and then make sure it is in a clean state. Because I know there was also an option where if the log file is more than 3 MB or so, it could zip. There was some issue with respect to that, which didn't really solve it. And then he did some archiving. That's what I understood. So I'm not sure. Maybe he might come back if that's a bug or not.
I think the issue. So if you generate a lot of logs, when you run the test job page, so when you click on your test job and you see the logs, so Lava will look at the logs and at the size of the file, and will see if it's above a limit, a specific limit. If that's above that limit, it will not try to display it, because it will kill your Firefox technically. If you try to run the 1 gig of logs, your Firefox will just die. So in this case, we offer a possibility to just download the raw YAML file, and if you want, you can use the Lava CLI to render it locally. It will do all the coloring for you, and you will see that in your shell. But there was an issue that Steven fixed, which if you submit, so your Firefox will reload regularly the logs, and we were not checking the limits on the size. Okay. So it was trying to load your page, and if you have 1 gig of logs, it will try to load everything. Yeah. Your laptop won't like it. Lava will be okay. It will take some CPU time. It's okay. That may be more your browser that will have some issues, and that has been fixed.
Okay.
It was crashing Lava 2. Okay, so it was crashing Lava 2. It has been fixed.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I don't have any question. I just want to give I want to say thanks to the Lava team because the NFS, extra parameters, and the context. So these are really helpful for me to tweak the things and easy to run instead of change all the kernel parameters and all. So it was not easy earlier. So when you introduce this option, so it's really helpful for me to test a lot of things. So I'm really thanks for that, Lava team. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know if this is the right forum because we're talking more about Lava itself, but I'm thinking about testing on Lava. But I have I have two test cases that I'm sort of interested in. One is a reboot test, and I've never tried to do that, but of course you need to reboot and then re-log in again.
Yes.
Is that possible at the moment?
That's a long-standing feature request that we have regarding how can we reboot inside Lava.
Yeah.
We looked at it recently. I think, yeah, it was around Lights Connect. It depends highly on the way you are deploying and booting your board. Because if you TFTP boot,
Yeah.
which means that we have to redo everything, and then relogging, it's okay. We can do that quite easily. But redoing the deploy, all the steps, and going back into a good state, because the way Lava is working is that we boot the board, we send some command on the command line on the console, and then we parse the output to try to find a prompt. And when we do have a prompt, we just start a shell script that we created. But the shell script would start from the beginning. So when you reboot, what should I do?
Yeah.
Where should I start? I will start again, technically. If you don't do anything, Lava will start from the beginning. So we need to design a way to say, okay, that's the command I want to start when I'm after the reboot. There are some issues to.
Yeah, I do realize it's not a trivial problem. The case I'm looking for is not the TFTP boot case, and where I don't actually need a redeployment, but it's the UBI boot case where I've got an UBI image in NAND flash and I want to just reboot. But it's still not a trivial thing to do. It's trivial for me to do it manually, of course, but it's always a different thing.
Yeah, so in the question on where to start the script, Debian's auto package test has support for reboots tests. So there's a mechanism there to know where.
Do you know how
I don't remember the details, but
okay.
It's there, and we can take some inspiration from it. But
yeah, that might be a good way to just look at how they are doing. Yes, but yeah, if your use case is just rebooting.
Yeah, without redeployment in my case. If I'm using an UBI image, it's burned into NAND flash. So yeah, I sort of run that UBI image.
Have you just tried to have deploy, boot, test, and then a boot action, just a minimal boot action?
Yeah.
And then a test action.
Oh, okay.
Because if you put every time there is a new boot action, Lava will reset it, the power supply. That's why we have a minimal boot in which now we can say don't reset please, because by default that's what Lava will do. But in your case, if you put a test action and then a boot action, so when your test script will finish, if Lava will go to the next action, which is a boot, it will do okay reset, reset the board, and if everything is already installed, it will boot directly to a prompt, and then you can have a second test action.
Yeah.
Or you can have an interactive test when you issue reboot command and then wait for a prompt like something login.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So in the second one, it's quite similar, but it's like a log out test. And I think that should be quite easy to have another action section, because the moment you do log in, then you have all your tests. So because we're detecting a password prompt, and then it's entering the password. I suppose I can have a test section, and I can go back to this other.
If you use just a normal boot and test action, this won't work because technically the auto login is done in the boot section.
Right.
This part of the boot, we consider a boot to be finished when we have a prompt.
Yeah.
So after a login, and then a test action usually is just typing execute that script, please.
Yeah.
So, but in your case, what you can do is to use the interactive test. In the interactive test, you just do a logout,
Yeah.
And then you can look at the prompt. It will be a login prompt, enter the login, etc., etc.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you can then go back to a normal test definition if you want, because
Yeah.
it will be you will be at a prompt, at a shell prompt.
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, it's the auto login is part of the boot, not of the test.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Any more? So one thing that's worth pointing out, we deliberately held back on the authentication refactoring and the control over table lengths so that we would have all of the database migrations for those contained together in one release. That's a policy that we've started following. We don't want to have database migrations and potentially extended downtime on every individual Lava release because of feedback that was causing problems for people. So we should be giving warning and before doing anything that needs database migrations and collecting them together. And we were thinking, no more frequently than every 6 months or so, possibly. Well,
Yeah, it was 3, but
okay,
yeah.
3.
We try to minimize the number of migrations we have, because we know it takes some time for admins.
Are there any features apart from the reboot testing which we know about that people are looking for that we don't supply yet?
I have another one. It's I have several boards that are managed inside the lab, and they sometimes go offline, and I don't know they've gone offline. And I asked Miloš about it, but at the moment apparently the main thing that happens is a notification in the IRC channel. But I was wondering, is there a way to notify the board owner that that's gone offline? But
You can, when it goes offline after health check, I guess.
yeah, so I've realised, I suppose, the health check, I could probably just get myself added as one of the people who's emailed at the health check.
Yes.
And then it goes offline. So that was just, but originally I was thinking, well, it goes offline. That's the bit I'm interested in. But of course, I'm interested in the health check as well. But I suppose the two are tied anyway. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Unless someone click on off on else bad,
yeah,
the only reason for a board to go in else equal bad is an health check failing.
yeah,
So technically, every time a health check is failing, the board's else will be bad.
yeah. Okay.
And that's the only way to have a health check else bad.
Cool.
Would you want a notification if we put it into maintenance for any reason? Because that's a different problem.
Yeah, I suppose so, because I mean, obviously, if you were going to put one of my boards into maintenance, you'd probably tell me beforehand anyway. But
I would hope so.
Yeah, but of course.
But thinking in a wider context,
yeah,
for generic Lava users across the world, not just the lab.
yeah,
If a board goes into maintenance, that's something that you might have a personal interest in, or a team might have an interest
Yeah.
in.
it might be nice to be able to subscribe to that, rather than just being part of the board conference. Like, you can subscribe to a Jira card or something. You can get.
Well, I'm just thinking, sort of interested parties on a device type or even a individual device level.
So every time one object in Lava change status, so yeah, it's transition. So workers, device, and test jobs, when the status is changing, so state or else are changing, notification is an event is published. The MQ event is published, so we can use that. I wanted to create a buzz.lavasoftware.org a long time ago about that. I have an implementation on that on buzz.lavasoftware.org. It's a website on which you can see all the events that my own the lavasoftware.org instance is generating. So every time a worker goes online, you will see it, online or offline. Every time a device changes state or else, you will see it. So you see all the changes all the time.
Yeah.
It's really verbose, but you can subscribe to some events and you will see that. If that's something that people are interested, we should maybe do that.
Yeah.
How about doing an RSS feed for each thing, for each object? So for like for a device have an RSS feed that people can subscribe to. It's pretty old tech, I know, but it's pretty bomb-proof.
Yeah, the problem is that it's not recorded. Not everything is recorded in the database, so you can't generate it.
No, but everything
afterwards.
that's a notification that goes through ZMQ. Yeah, every transition. Just
And generate
stick
an
that
RSS.
into an RSS file hosted over HTTP, and then let people subscribe to it.
I think it's already supported by Reactor Web. I think.
I mean, the problem with that is you've got to say, well, I'm only interested in these types of transitions. Like, I'm not interested if it goes idle because it just means it's finished a job. Yeah? Otherwise, you're going to be getting, you've got a queue of 100 jobs. Oh, it's running. Oh, it's idle. Oh, it's running. Oh, it's idle. Yeah.
That should be part of Reactor Web, I think.
Yeah, could be.
Because Reactor Web is storing, so Reactor Bus, which is the bus itself, is storing absolutely every event into database. So I have a database of 2 or 3 gigs of just events. So it takes some space if you run it for years. So yes, based on that, we can generate an RSS. Yes, that's an idea.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, you could just, I guess, with the query in the URL, you can just then filter exactly what you're looking for. Obviously, it might get expensive if you got lots of users querying regularly, but yeah.
Just indexing correctly, and it's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, the fields are really small every time, so. Patch is welcome for Reactor Bus, Matt.
Anything else? I guess we're done. Thanks for turning up, folks. Hope that was useful.
Thanks.